I think we have seen the last of minicamp around the NFL. You know how these things work, Jody. Once something goes away, they're not giving it back. And the Eagles and a number of other teams around the NFL, which we'll get into, have canceled mandatory minicamp. And I'm going to miss it. I'm going to be honest. That's what I'm going to miss. And
Okay.
I think NFL fans are going to miss it as well.
You so enjoyed yourself last week at rookie mini camp that you longed for the mandatory mini camp that was upcoming, and now you're all sad because
Well,
that will no
now
longer take place.
let me, there was a little bit more pep in my step at rookie camp simply because of last year. Look, I got to be honest, for 20 plus years, going to rookie camp, mini football practice is not exciting for people who've never been to one. It is not an exciting thing. And when you do it time and time again, year after year after year, yeah, it gets boring, it gets monotonous, it gets tedious. You're not excited about it. This year, a little bit different because of the pandemic and it took it away. Now with minicamp though, I was always a little excited for a number of reasons. The perfect reason the Eagles made a trade for a cornerback yesterday. We'll get into that, uh, Josiah Scott. But um, I was thinking about, okay, what is the cornerback position going to look like on this team? I have no idea. I'll give you my guess, my best guess. I could have told you where they started if we had minicamp. I could have told you who was lining up with the first team, and doesn't mean it's going to end up that way, but it gives you an inkling into the thought process of the coaching staff. And I thought that was important for an information gathering process, not only
Sure.
for us but the fans. The fans want to know. That's what we're doing this for. And now you got to wait till late July and see who lines up. That kind of sucks, to be honest.
It does, and Eagle fans are going to be more out of sorts because it is just one big giant question mark until they do start actual mini camp, which isn't, as you said, for several weeks now down the road. Let's try and lay it out. I think I've got a grasp on it. I know you've got a better grasp than me. What was negotiated out, and that's what it's being described as a negotiation. And I'm guessing that's on point and accurate. That the coaching staff, along with Howie Roseman, the executives, and the leaders and veterans on this team, redid, rewrote, re-agreed to what their offseason is going to look like, that the quote unquote OTAs have all gone away, but as has the mandatory, when everyone is obligated, as per the collective bargaining agreement, to show up. That is also gone by the board, and they've traded all this off for the agreement that the optional training workout that they're going to have over the next several weeks, which is not mandatory, players can either choose to show up or not show up, will be kept to just conditioning and team training without actual playing and 7-on-7s or 11-on-11s. So it was a meeting of the minds between the players and the organization. Explain what this compromise actually means. What kind of an effect do you think it has? Is there a winner and a loser in this situation? I'm guessing that the fans are a loser, but from a players versus management standpoint, is there a winner or a loser in this new compromised offseason Eagles having?
Well, the only defined losers are the fans, are the people who care about this kind of thing. Um, I would guess, actually, I'll say another defined loser is the aesthetics of the game itself. I think that's a loser. As far as players versus owners got what they wanted. That was the extra game, 17. The NFL tried to, the players had been on this for a while. They wanted to scale back off-season work. You mentioned how they framed it locally. This is happening everywhere, Jody. It's not just Philadelphia. And everybody's magically coming up with the same compromise. But it's not spun as a league players union thing. In each individual city, the Indianapolis Colts came up with the exact same thing as the Eagles magically. They're spinning it as the players got together with Nick Sirianni and the coaches in Philadelphia and no, this is the way it's going throughout the league. So it was a players union league thing more than anything else. Number one, let's get that out of the equation. As far as, it's going to be conditioning and teaching, no team drills, no 7-on-7s, nothing like that. Okay. They got through it last year. That was whole JC Treader's whole thing. We got through it last year. We were fine. The game didn't suffer. I wouldn't necessarily agree with them. I think, here's how I put it, Jody. Take football out of the equation. We'll use you as an example. You've been doing this for a very long time as a talk show host in numerous stations, national, local. What were you better day one or were you better in year 15? I think everybody can identify that repetition makes you better at everything. Everything. It doesn't matter what it is. Practice makes perfect, whatever cliche you want to put out there. So if you're practicing less, you're not as good. Bottom line. That is as simple as I can put it. And that's why I bring up the aesthetic of the game. For a new generation of fans, they don't know. They've been seeing this RPO stuff, and that to them is professional football. And that's fine. The TV ratings are great. That's why the owners don't care. The money keeps rolling in. Nobody cared. But the aesthetics of this game, and you could argue the aesthetics of pro sports as a whole, because I put the NBA and Major League Baseball in this category as well, they're terrible for people that have been around for a while. I mean, I'm not talking about the athletes. The athletes are better. The athletes are more equipped. But the game itself, the fundamentals, the technique, all that stuff just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And less practice means worse.
I agree with that. The main advantage I would see from a player standpoint of practicing less is not that the game will be better, not that because they're more rested, because they're not putting time and effort into practice. Oh, that'll show up on Sunday afternoons when we play the games that really can. I don't buy that for a millisecond. But yeah, I guess it's less chance to get injured. That's the only upside that I see realistically from a player standpoint. You and I discussed this right before we hopped on the air. It's the players actually wanting to do less. As you discuss the aesthetics, they're not as worried about the aesthetics. The television ratings are as good as they are. We expect all the stadiums to be filled to the rim once they're allowed to be filled to the rim. So there's no residual payoff on the downside of less aesthetics. But I think the players just want to do less to get paid for more. They believe they're already doing more by signing off on a 17th game. So, since we're doing that, even though we're going to get our chunk of the change, the owners get a bigger chunk of the change. So we need to get something in return. Here's what we want in return. We want to do less during the offseason. We want to work less. Where I will give them at least some credit is we want to take less of a chance of being hurt.
And I don't think... I've said this all the time, Jody. It's a quality of life issue for the players. And I get it from the player standpoint. They have to work. People say they don't want to do anything. It's not about that. It's about this sport is such a grind. They have to keep themselves in shape. This isn't the old days from that perspective where guys, back in the 60s and 70s would go get insurance jobs in the offseason to supplement their income. I mean, they have to stay in shape or they're going to get lapped. And this thing is a grind, and it keeps going and going and going for them. And it is a 12-month process. You see Jalen Hurts all over the place, keeps working on his game away from the facility. Players are smart. They know they got to stay sharp. They're still working, but they just want to be on their own time. They want to, if they live in Florida or Texas, they want to be down there. They want to enjoy the offseason with their families. They're still doing work. So I give them all the credit in the world for that kind of stuff. Now, there's always unintended consequences. You know that to any decision, Jody. We've been talking about Zach Ertz. And by the way, if Howie Roseman is listening, please, please, please don't keep this going to the opening of training camp. I beg of you. Do me that one favor, Howie. But beyond that, you know, I've been talking about you've been talking about who's going to be the second tight end if Zach Ertz isn't here. I brought up Jack Stoll, an undrafted free agent. Well, guess what, Jody? He doesn't have a chance now, an opportunity to open the eyes of the coaching staff in minicamp and say, you know, maybe we have something in Jack Stoll. Now, he'll still have an opportunity the first couple of days of training camp, but it limits those opportunities. That's the other end of the spectrum. All these guys at the back end of the roster trying to get noticed, trying to get something. They took away a preseason game from them. It just creates less opportunities for those guys. I think it was interesting. Pat McAfee was on his show. Now, Pat, you know, was a great punter in this day. It was hilarious, and he said he hates the union because they don't work for him. I don't necessarily agree with that because they do work for the more named players, the superstar players, the star players. And even Pat was a very good punter, even though it's a punter. Still, he was a Pro Bowl level punter at some point. They don't work for the young guys. They don't work for the undrafted guys trying to make a roster. They don't work for the 53rd guy, the 52nd guy. That's who gets hurt, but nobody cares. Just like I said, you know, yes, the players don't care about the aesthetics of the game. Either do the owners. If they did, they'd fight this stuff. But they got what they wanted. And they got that 17th game and the extra billions that come from that.
Let me ask you to speculate. If you surely know, please share. But I'm guessing that Howie Roseman didn't call you and say, off the record, John, here's exactly what transpired the last couple of days in negotiations with the veteran guys here on the roster. Nick Sirianni's certainly the point guy. He's the guy who was quoted as to what the agreement was and what the upside is for the Eagles as a team and what he thinks they can accomplish in this new offseason world that they just came to an agreement on. The Eagles separately, all by their lonesome, not in conjunction with anybody else. Wink, wink, nod, nod. As you pointed out, it's happening in all of the towns across the National Football League. I would guess that Howie Roseman would have to be more the driving force behind this because there are guys that were included in this negotiation on the player side that have never met Nick Sirianni, that have never seen him, that have been out of town this entire offseason since Nick Sirianni and his entire staff were hired. So they're talking about what work they will or won't be doing with the coaching staff who they don't even know. They might bump into him in Wawa and not even realize, oh, shoot, that's Coach. So it had to be Howie Roseman doing this negotiation to come up with exactly what the players will and or won't be willing to do, exactly what the time frame is going to be, exactly what they're going to call it. This was a Howie deal, was it not?
No, I think it was a league players union deal. And then they spun it. I think from the league's perspective, they didn't want to go all in and say, okay, we're giving this to you forever in perpetuity. So, in other words, they made it a localized thing to take it off their shoulders and say, we'll revisit this next year because they've been wrangling since the start of the pandemic, the union and the league. They keep, you know, this is a very fluid process. And the minute you put a period on something, it's done. I don't think the league wants to do that yet. Ultimately, I think it's going to happen, but they don't want to do that yet. So to stop that period and put a comma on it, to be continued, they did it in a localized fashion. So that's why you can go to other team websites and see essentially the same story with the same players, the GM, the coach. We talked to the veteran players. We worked out this. Maybe there's a little bit of a tweak in different cities, and certainly Howie and Nick are involved in the planning. But this, as I said, this is pretty much a league-wide thing now. This is what's going on, and this was the brokered agreement, so to speak, You remember when all those statements started coming out from the NFLPA, and we joked about we're not showing up for voluntary work, and everybody showed up. This is why.
Right.
They were brokering this agreement. They're not having off-season work as typical off-season work, but the compromise they would come in to meet the coaching staff, to get a little teaching, and that's where the NFL felt they could save a little bit of face. So I think it's a national thing spun locally, so the NFL doesn't have to put a period on it and say what I just said at the beginning of the show. Mini camps are dead. They just don't want to admit it yet.
Well, and they're going to have mini camps. They're just not mandatory. It's going to still take place. It's going to be scaled back. It's not going to be what we used to know as mini camps. They're not going to be doing the same.
Mandatory mini camps are dead.
Mandatory is the word mandatory, and required attendance is out the window. And that kind of plays into what you just stated in your Pat McAfee story. The union works for the veteran guys. They're working for the guys who have been there for years and making millions of dollars. They're really not sweating the undrafted free agents or the guys who are somewhere between 62 and 53 on the roster trying to find their way. Because, those guys want to be there. And that's what has happened the first couple of days. You're getting 60, 70, 80 guys show up. Well, guess who all those guys are? Those are the guys who were just picked in the draft or signed those undrafted free agent contracts or assigned to futures contracts who aren't guaranteed a penny going forward. Yeah, they want to be there. They want to show their wares. They want to try and grab a coach's attention so they might be able to grab a roster spot. This negotiation was about and will continue to be about the star players for the most part, not the guys who are fringe on the roster.
It's a microcosm of society, Jody. The little guy gets run over, always.
All right, and yes, the Eagles, and in addition to all the off-season negotiating that came down yesterday, they did actually make a move. They upgraded their cornerback room. How much?
Did they?
Well, it's pretty simple. Do you believe that the cornerback they gave up in the deal is better than the cornerback they received? Did they add a 6th-round draft pick to a trade yesterday to actually acquire a lesser cornerback? I'll give Howie Roseman, and I don't know anything about either of these two players, but I'll give Howie Roseman that much credit. I don't think he traded.
And by the way, Jody, real quick, before we go to the break, because we got Martin Frank coming up, but think about, put this in your chaw and chew on it a little bit. Howie Roseman just traded a 2023 pick. He's going to be around for a while. He's got a leash. So these people hoping it's going to go bad. Howie's entrenched. Don't worry about Howie.
Yeah, he is pretty entrenched. He's trading future draft picks 2 years down the road, not even next year, 2 years down the road. But Josiah Scott is the answer at cornerback for the Eagles. Well, I'll get Johnny Mac's take on that, and also that of Martin Frank, who's going to join us coming up next. We are your Birds 365 duo, the Mac and Mac guys, Jody McDonald and John McMullen. Martin Frank next here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.